Hi there, my name is Trolls. Welcome to Soundpaint. In the video today, it's all about this little guy here. This is the MFB 522. It's a discontinued analog drum machine. And the first time I ever heard of it was by watching a Nils Frahm concert, and I heard the most amazing drums that I think I've ever heard at a concert. This piercing, really fresh 808-ish kind of sound, but very modern. And after much research, it turned out that it was the MFB 522. And while it may not look like a lot, it really packs a punch like no other drum machine I've heard, especially of its size. If you look behind me here, you'll see that there is both a CR78, 808, and a 909, all vintage. And this guy here is absolutely on par with them, though it's not priced the same way, even for a discontinued unit. In fact, I fell in love with the MFB 522 so much that I decided to ultra deep sample it myself. And as you're about to witness in this video here, it goes super deep. I obviously recorded the drum machine in all possible instances as ultra deep samples, meaning that every state of every button was recorded in great precision, so you really have a one-to-one representation of the machine. But also ran it through a variety of analog hardware, old plate reverbs, tape delays, like real tape delays, a variety of amplifiers and tube amps as well to really heat up the signal. I have a variety of sort of compressors, all sorts of stuff that I like to run it through to bring forth different colors in it. So overall speaking, you have the core unit, just like it is here, at a one-to-one correlation in ultra deep sampling. You have saturated kits where I'm heating up things. It has the most magical bass drum and the clap is right up there with the 808. So it's sometimes fun to heat those signals a little bit with analog hardware and just see if you can milk it a little more. And then I also created really hardcore distorted patches because it's a modern drum machine and it really packs a punch in a way that even the old vintage machines can't. So I'm so excited to show you. Let's get inside of it. This is the MFB 522, or in the Soundpaint world, as we call it, the Red 522. Okay, so we're inside of Soundpaint and I got the UDS patch loaded here, meaning the ultra deep sample patch. And let me just show you in essence what I mean when we talk about ultra deep sampling. If you look over here, I have the unit here and I'm gonna try to explain what's going on when I play on the keys in terms of how the unit was recorded. For example, here on the bass drum, you can hear all these sort of pitch kind of steps. That's essentially like moving the pitch button over here on the unit, but you get all the variations from the lowest to the highest. Almost becomes like a, talking drum. Or for example, on the snare, there are many different variations on it. You can use the noise button on it. It has a tonal button and you can combine them. And all that is dealt with in velocities on different keys. So check out the snare. You can hear they're different on every key. It also has the meanest clap in the world. It's right up there with the 808 and the 909 in my opinion, but it's a little more modern, and modern is probably the best word to really describe the 522. It's like an 808 but forward in time, and I know it's the closest thing I've ever heard to a modern representation of the 808, and that's one of the things that is just so freaking magical about it. But let me try to take you into the programs and just show you how wide and diverse and deep and beautiful and colorful this unit is. You can get so much out of it. It's much more than just a drum machine. Because we're in the realm of ultra deep samples, there's so much you can do with variations of individual notes, and you can make it into a synthesizer as well. Obviously, it's an analog drum machine, so it is a synthesizer just designed with sort of rhythm and drums in mind. This one is so nasty. It was recorded through the plasma distortion, and you can really hear it here on the bass drum. It gets very sort of crunchy and like vinyl-y. Isn't that cool? One of the cool things about the 522 is also that the bass drum is prolonged. On the original 808, the bass drum is kind of short, and later on they learned like, oh my God, everyone wants that sort of deep, oomphy kind of bass, and that's exactly what you get here. Check it like real deep. So this is analog. You can just hear the analog goodness in it, like. You know, it's pushing some boundaries. Let's put in the ARP here and see what we got. All right, so we just listened to kind of distorted kind of patches. In this one here, you're going to hear something with a natural analog reverb inside of it. It's really a beautiful, more romantic 80s kind of representation of this beautiful Wonder Machine. It's just so sweet. And you hear a little click on that bass drum? That's an analog click. It's not digital. It has a soft sort of attack to it. And that's the stuff that is just super hard to emulate in computers. That's what you get out of real electronics and all the goodness inside of them. Let's hear it in the ARP here as well. So warm. I mean, it's kind of interesting. In Soundpaint, you have the benefit of having extended ranges, so the bass drum goes eternally down the keyboard. It almost becomes like a bass drum and a tom up in the top. And obviously we have all the toms here as well. And they continue all the way up the keyboard. Yeah, all the way. Here's a Bongo Arp. What I'm doing this one here is that if you notice up here, I got one note stretch activated. So I just isolated one of the toms on the instrument and made it fully playable across the entire keyboard. And this is where it falls into the domain of becoming a synthesizer. Oh, you hear that crackling? Even more, I love it. This next one here is specifically recorded with additional crackle in it. Check it out. All that analog goodness and crackle and fuzz. It also has on the snare, for example. Here. That's a mean snare and clap combination. So mean. All right, so check this one out here and try to think about what's going on before I explain it. Strange. So up here you'll see that I've done the one note stretch, but the one note stretch is done on a peculiar patch here. I took everything and ran it through a rarest pedal, and the rarest pedal will create pitch delays of the same sound, hence that sort of weird kind of echo sound. So cool. Also very, very sort of filmic in its tone. I mean, that's a score right there. And because it's ultra deep sampled, you always know that you're never going to get the same thing when you repeat the keys here. So every single time, small variations, creating that analog goodness. And then you also probably notice that when I move the mod wheel here, that there's sort of additional pitch fluctuations that's coming from our built-in tape delay. So it's a real tape sort of processed rarest pedal running through another BPD delay and a plate reverb in here, and that creates that sort of water-like effect. Cute. Here's Electro bits. So you can see you can really go into distorted territory here. And in this one here, I'm using the bit brush, but let me try to turn the bit brush off so you can hear how distorted it is in its own right. And then when you turn these babies on here, all right, so this next one is interesting. I took the 522 and ran it directly through my old school Roland tape delay, and that created this sound here. And you can hear there's a lot of stuff going on. There's noise and all that coming from these old units, but that's a part of the charm. And just check it out here. It's very filmic in its vibe. And it's interesting when we use these old analog technologies that it actually ends up sounding more modern. It's so cool that way. And here's another variation of the same part here, again, in that sort of very filmic realm. That's why we call it the film arp, I guess. And here's the Filmic Cow. Obviously, this drum machine, as with any old school drum machine with respect for itself, has a mean cowbell sound. This is probably the meanest I think I've ever heard on an analog drum machine. confused. I get lost in this one. Let me try another filter kit here. What a sweet kit. I mean, that is the hardest hitting cowbell in the universe. They should almost do like a modern enactment of I Want to Dance For You. And here's one of the heavier kits. Everything is tuned down in the machine, so even the snare is kind of low, the bass drum's kind of low. Everything has sort of a low kind of feel to it. So warm, right? Also has a harsh rim shot. One of the cool aspects about the 522 as well is that you can do the whole tonal bass drum, but you also has a more muted one, just like a more like oomph. And you'll see no matter what part I load, it's the same premise. Instead of the sort of tonal bass drum. We got mad hell here. What? All right, let's take what's going on. Let's strip all the effects here first and just listen to it in its core condition. That's coming from all the analog hardware I ran it through. I have a couple of really heavy distortions that I use for this one. Do we even dare to try the cowbell? Oh shit. I mean, does this one even need more effects? Let's just add them here. I've stopped dropping from my subwoofer here. Let me just pick it up. We're dealing with the heavy elements here, no doubt about it. Here's one more sort of noisy one. I used a variety of warm compression on it, but it generated more noise out of the unit as well. It's beautiful in its own right. So as you can hear in the example here, this one is kind of noisy. sometimes when I super enhance the signal, you can almost hear the electrical components in it. And that's with a sort of super enhanced compression on the unit. I kind of like the sound, it's very unique, but it really, really has a punch to it. And there is something gratifying for me, at least when I have this feeling of noise around me, and it's something we are really, really going to embrace in Soundpaint, because these old units have noise to them, just like tape has noise to it, just like vinyl has noise to it. And I think over the years, we stripped that with too much noise reduction in sampling, and we forgot that some of the beauty in these old units, and surely the way recordings were made in the past, there was no noise reduction, it was what it was. And there's beauty in that as well. But you know what? I think I've been a little bit hard on the cowbell actually. I forgot that I made this program a little while ago. That's actually really embracing that beautiful cowbell sound for the magical thing it is. Check it out here. Isn't that sweet? Let me do a one note stretch in the cowbell. One thing I also love about this unit is the way the hi-hat sounds. Let me just load the main patch here. Hi-hats for me is a sign on its own. Too often I find them to be a little bit hissy on the ear, which is why I love the hi-hats in the 808. Still probably my favorite hi-hat sound of all time, but this one is close and it has a little more of that sort of modern kind of feel to it. So it's going to sit great in modern contemporary hybrid scores because of that piercing quality, but yet with an homage to the analog domain. So in its completely raw state, even before equalizer, it's just, and of course you can go in and shape it a little bit, and we can add a little extra sort of dimension to it here. And ultra deep sample also means that you have an incredible amount of variation. So for example, if I just record the hi-hat here, and we just play it without anything else, you'll notice that it's not hard on the ear. And the reason for that is because there's natural variations in it. So it's really, really like sitting in front of an analog unit. We can add a little bit of analog additions to the ARP here as well. And you can see here, just with this single sound, that we can actually sculpt like really cool grooves because we have obviously velocity capability inside of the ARP as well. But hear how it's easy on the ear? That's analog for you. And it's hard to describe for me, but whenever I use it in context to sort of more high-end productions, there's no competing with analog. It just sits better in the mix. And I think it's because in the core of its DNA, it's more musical. Analog means that the sound is always in movement. Here's a fat, punchy kit. This one is sort of in the warm domain. It's not distorted, but it's borderlining right where the analog heat is starting to make it a little sort of super sexy. underlining that sort of where things are not distorted, but they have that fuzz to them. You can hear the bounce on the bass drum. It's a lot, but it's not totally distorted yet. That's sort of the sweetness of analog heat. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's really, really great for that sort of motion picturesque thing. Nils Frahm has used it in many different compositions, and it really gives that sort of modern propulsion to the sound. Very pleasant on the ear as well. It's not harsh, so it can be good for underscoring, but also for action stuff, for sure. Short and sexy. And this is a dry kit, so no messing around. All the sounds are sort of short. That top 40 right there, right? Let me pull a little bit in the other direction of that. This is actually my favorite program inside of the 522. This particular part here was made by running the 522 through my Kapistan tape delay emulation. And in this one here, it just has a super, super nice sort of shuffle feel to it. Beautiful. Heavenly sound. You know, let me just one note stretch that one as well. Never done that before, but. And sort of going back to the more normal state of the drum machine, here's a more soft version of it. There is one quality to the 522 that I really think makes it stand out, and that's its sheer funky quality. Let me just show you what I mean by playing a simple groove inside of the ARP here. So mean. And here's some more tape delay action for you. I mean, it almost sounds like an old school kind of kit. Not that, but the snare here. Right? Isn't that kind of like an old school drum kit? Here's another part run through the auto compressor, one of my favorite hardware compressors. And in this case here, it's really more of a techno kind of synthy thing. It can be very dance-like as well. It's not just like that it's funky and filmic, but awesome for house and dance as well. Check this one out. And while we've talked about sort of the funky and filmic qualities of it as well, I think it's an awesome dance and trance machine as well. Check out here what happens when I move the mod wheel up and just how much sort of analog goodness you can make out of it and how explosive the unit can become as well. And the best way to describe it for me is that it feels a little bit like sitting with an analog in front of me, or even a modular at times, because there's so many things we can do in Soundpaint so easily to the sound, but yet have all the benefits of true analog hardware running through true analog circuitry. It's a different proposition than the digital world. Both are beautiful, none is better than the other, but there are things that happens with hardware that we simply cannot emulate, a level of complexity at an atomic level that we just have to appreciate and now fully have access to inside of these beautiful instruments. I mean, it just screams analog. Here's an analog boost. I mean, it's also just so nice on its own, just the core of it. We don't always have to saturate or accentuate things. Just so beautiful in its own right. But of course we can. This is the WTF, and for a reason. So as you can see, the sonic width, depth, and integrity of this unit is unmistakably big. And while it looks little and short in stature, I would put it right up there with the greatest of drum machines. It's over 18,700 real-time samples. And obviously, there's not that many instruments. There is a bass drum and a snare and a cowbell claps, a couple of toms, a couple of hats, and that's pretty much it, and a cymbal. And a conga as well, and a tom. But that does not justify 18,700 samples, or does it? As I've mentioned in other videos, for me, if you really want to get down in boogie and sampling, in ultra deep sampling, we have to record these units in such great depths that the engine can learn their true behavior. So it's not just an emulation or a simulation, it's truly like sitting there with a unit. And for me, it just brings me the greatest childish joy in the keys, because these units are so magical and they can be tricky to deal with. If you notice here, there's a MIDI thing here, but even the outputs on this unit here are somewhat delicate, and it's also very tiny to use if you have big fingers like me. It was actually kind of difficult, if you notice here, like just to turn these dials. But I worked through it, and the end result is hopefully a product and an instrument that will live forever, just like I think this machine here will as well, Bart here. Anyway, it's a pleasure as always to show you these things, and forgive me if these videos become long, but there's a lot to show, and there's no way I can represent 18,700 samples in an even deep and comprehensive way, other than just to show you that these small variations mean so much. I often think of a drummer versus a drum machine. A drum machine plays a perfect groove, but it has no soul to it. A real drummer is not perfectly theoretically correct when he plays, but therein lies the groove, therein lies the heart. And I believe it's the same thing that goes on in the deeper realm of these units. These units are constantly in movement, constantly small things happening at an electric level. And that's a part of the beauty of these analog units and why I love them so much inside of Soundpaint. And also because they just bring that more modern, super professional kind of sound that we don't get with normal VSTs, in my opinion. Anyway, such a pleasure to have you guys see these videos, and I hope this has made some sense. This is Troll signing out from Soundpaint. See you in the next one.